I still remember the exact moments I realized my life wasn't entirely my own. It was a Tuesday morning in late September, the kind of morning where the air smells like wet leaves and distant wood smoke. I was standing in line at the coffee shop on Maple Street, the one with the chipped green tiles and the barista who always drew hearts in the foam, when my phone buzzed. A text from a number I didn't recognize. "We need to talk. It's about your sister." The thing is, I don't have a sister, or at least I didn't think I did. My name is Claire, and for 32 years I'd been an only child. My parents, steady, predictable people who still held hands at the dinner table, had told me the same story my entire life. I was their miracle baby, born after years of trying, a gift they'd almost given up hope for. There were photo albums to prove it, birthday parties where I was the only child, Christmas mornings with presents labelled only to me. So, when I read that text, standing there with my reusable cup clutched in my hand and the autumn sun slanting through the window, I felt something shift inside my chest. Like a door I didn't know existed had just been unlocked. I should have deleted it. I should have gone about my day, picked up my oat milk latte, driven to the elementary school where I taught 3rd grade, smiled at my students as they tumbled through the door with their backpacks and gap-toothed grins. But I didn't. Instead, I typed back, "Who is this?" The response came immediately. "Meet me at Riverside Park, 2 p.m, bench by the old oak tree. Please come. This isn't a joke." I almost didn't go. I sat through my morning classes in a daze, barely hearing the sound of pencils scratching paper or the excited chatter during reading time. My mind kept circling back to that text, turning it over and over like a stone in my pocket. A sister? What sister? Why now? Why like this? At lunch I told myself I wouldn't go. It was clearly a mistake, or worse, some kind of scam. People didn't just discover siblings at 32. That was the stuff of soap operas and paperback novels, not real life. But at 1:45, I found myself in my car, driving toward Riverside Park. The park was nearly empty when I arrived. A few joggers passed by, earbuds in, lost in their own worlds. A mother pushed a stroller along the path, cooing softly to her baby. And there, on the bench by the old oak tree, the one with initials carved into its trunk and branches that stretched like open arms, sat a woman. She was maybe a few years younger than me, with dark hair pulled back in a ponytail and a grey cardigan wrapped tight around her shoulders. But it was her face that stopped me cold, because I was looking at my own face. Not identical, not quite. Her nose was slightly different, her jawline a bit softer. But the eyes, those were the same hazel eyes I saw in the mirror every morning, flecked with gold around the edges. The same high cheekbones, the same slight asymmetry to the smile that was just beginning to form as she stood up. "Claire?" she said, her voice trembling. I couldn't speak. I just stood there frozen on the path, feeling like the ground had turned to water beneath my feet. "I'm Emma," she said, taking a tentative step toward me. I think I'm your twin sister." The world has a way of splitting open sometimes. You're living your life, following the script you've always known, and the next, everything you thought was solid turns out to be made of smoke. We sat on that bench for 3 hours. Emma told me her story in fits and starts, her hands twisting in her lap like she was trying to hold something invisible. She'd been adopted at birth, she said, raised by loving parents in a town 2 states away. She'd always known she was adopted. Her parents had never hidden it, but she'd never felt the need to search for her biological family, not until 6 months ago, when her adoptive mother passed away from cancer. "She told me something before she died," Emma said, her voice barely above a whisper. "She said I had a twin, that we'd been separated at birth. She made me promise I'd find you." I felt numb. But why? Why would we be separated? Emma shook her head. "That's what I've been trying to figure out. I hired a private investigator, did DNA tests, searched through adoption records. Everything led me to you." She pulled out her phone and showed me documents, birth certificates, DNA results, photographs. In one picture, 2 newborns lay side by side in a hospital bassinet, identical except for the pink and blue hospital bracelets on their tiny wrists. On the back, someone had written in faded ink, "Claire and Emma, may God forgive us." "Who wrote that?" I asked, my throat tight. "I don't know," Emma said, "but I think your parents do." I didn't want to believe it. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with those documents spread out in front of me, a glass of wine I hadn't touched growing warm in my hand. My apartment felt different somehow, smaller, like the walls were pressing in. The framed photos on my bookshelf seemed to mock me. There I was at 5, gap-toothed and grinning in my mother's arms. There at 10, holding my first spelling bee trophy. At 16, dressed for prom with my parents beaming beside me. In every single picture I was alone. But now I knew I shouldn't have been. I called my parents 3 times before my mother finally answered. "Claire, honey, it's late," she said, and I could hear the television playing in the background, some game show with canned laughter. "Mom, I need to ask you something." My voice sounded strange to my own ears, flat and distant. "Of course, sweetheart. What is it?" I took a breath. "Do I have a twin sister?" The silence that followed was so complete I thought the call had dropped. Then I heard it, a sharp intake of breath like someone had been punched in the stomach. "Who told you that?" Her voice had changed completely, gone hard and sharp. "So it's true. It wasn't a question. Claire, listen to me." "It's true," I said again, and something inside me cracked open. "I have a sister. Her name is Emma. She found me. She has documents, DNA tests, everything. And you lied to me. For 32 years you lied to me." "It's not that simple," my mother said, and now I could hear my father's voice in the background, urgent and low. "Claire, please just let us explain." I hung up. They showed up at my apartment the next morning, before I'd even had my coffee. My father looked older than I remembered, the lines around his eyes deeper, his shoulders slightly stooped. My mother's hands were shaking as she clutched her purse. They stood in my doorway like strangers asking for shelter, and I realized with a jolt that I wasn't sure I knew them anymore. "Can we come in?" my father asked softly. I stepped aside without a word. We sat in my living room, me on the couch, them on the 2 chairs I'd bought at a yard sale years ago, and the silence stretched between us like a chasm. Finally, my mother spoke. "We were going to tell you," she said, her voice thick. "We always planned to tell you, but then days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and suddenly you were growing up and it felt like it would hurt you more to know." "Tell me the truth," I interrupted. "All of it. Now." My father reached over and took my mother's hand. His eyes were wet when he looked at me. "You and Emma were born to a woman named Sarah Mitchell," he said. "She was 20 years old, unmarried and desperate. We knew her through church. She came to us because she'd heard we'd been trying to have a baby for years. She offered us both of you," my mother continued, and a tear slid down her cheek. "But we couldn't afford to raise twins. We were barely making ends meet as it was. Your father had just lost his job, and I was working 2 part-time positions just to keep us afloat." I felt something cold settle in my chest. "So you chose me?" "No," my father said quickly. "It wasn't like that. Sarah had another couple lined up. Good people who desperately wanted a child. The plan was always for both of you to have loving homes. We couldn't bear to lose you both, and we couldn't afford to keep you both. So you split us up." The words came out flat, emotionless, but inside I was screaming. "You took me and gave my sister away, and then you lied about it for my entire life." "We were young," my mother sobbed. "We were scared and broke, and we made a terrible decision. But Claire, sweetheart, you have to understand. We loved you. We love you. Everything we did because we wanted to give you the best life we could." "And what about Emma?" I asked. "What about her life? Did you ever think about her? Did you ever wonder if she was looking for her family, for me?" My father's face crumbled. "Every day," he whispered, "every single day." I met with Emma again 3 days later, this time at a small cafe downtown. She ordered chamomile tea and wrapped her hands around the cup like she was trying to warm herself from the inside out. We sat across from each other, 2 women who should have grown up sharing a bedroom, trading secrets, braiding each other's hair, but instead had lived completely separate lives. "I'm sorry," I said finally. "I'm sorry this happened to us. I'm sorry we lost all that time." Emma looked up, her eyes, my eyes, shining with unshed tears. "It's not your fault, I know, but I'm still sorry." We talked for hours. She told me about her childhood in Pennsylvania, about her adoptive parents who had showered her with love but could never quite fill the gap she'd always felt. She told me about her job as a nurse, about her apartment with the view of the river, about her boyfriend who proposed last month with a ring his grandmother had worn. "I haven't given him an answer yet," she admitted. "I wanted to find you first. I needed to know where I came from before I could figure out where I was going." I told her about my life too. The teaching job I loved, the small apartment that felt too quiet sometimes, the long line of relationships that never quite worked out because I could never shake the feeling that something was missing. "Maybe this is what was missing," I said softly. Emma reached across the table and took my hand. Her fingers were warm, familiar in a way that made my chest ache. "I used to have dreams," she said, "when I was little. Dreams about a girl who looked just like me. We were playing in a garden and there were butterflies everywhere and I was so happy. When I woke up, I always felt so sad, like I'd lost something precious. My mom said they were just dreams, but I think some part of me always remembered you." I felt tears prick my eyes. I had those dreams too. Over the next few months, Emma and I built a relationship from scratch. It was strange and wonderful and sometimes painful, like learning to walk on a leg that had been broken and reset wrong. We discovered that we both loved Thai food and hated horror movies. We both had a habit of humming when we were nervous and reading the ends of books first. We both cried at the same commercials and laughed at the same jokes. But we also had differences. Years of separate experiences that had shaped us in different ways. Emma was more outgoing, more willing to take risks. I was cautious, analytical, always thinking 3 steps ahead. She jumped into cold water. I tested it with my toe first. "We're like 2 halves of the same person," she said one day as we walked through Riverside Park, the leaves crunching under our feet. "But we're also completely ourselves." "Is that possible?" I asked. "To be both?" she smiled. "I think we're proof that it is." But as Emma and I grew closer, the distance between me and my parents widened. I couldn't look at them without feeling a surge of anger so intense it scared me. Every time my mother called, every time my father texted, I felt that old betrayal rise up like bile in my throat. They'd stolen something from me, from both of us, and no amount of apologies could give it back. "You need to forgive them," Emma said one evening as we sat in my apartment, Chinese takeout containers spread across the coffee table. "Not for them. For you." "How can you say that?" I asked, incredulous. "They're the reason we didn't know each other. They're the reason we missed 32 years together." "I know," Emma said quietly, "but holding on to that anger, it's like drinking poison and expecting them to die. My therapist told me that once, and it stuck with me." "Your therapist?" I set down my chopsticks. "You're in therapy?" She nodded. "Have been for years. Adoption trauma is real, Claire. Finding out you have a twin you never knew existed is real. And yeah, what your parents did was wrong, but they were also 2 scared kids trying to make an impossible choice. That doesn't excuse it, but maybe it explains it." I wanted to argue, to defend my anger, but something in her words made me pause. "I'm not ready," I said finally. "That's okay," Emma said, reaching over to squeeze my hand. "Just don't wait too long. Life's too short, and we've already lost enough time." The breakthrough came in December, during the first real snowfall of the year. I was driving home from work when I saw them, my parents standing outside my apartment building. They looked smaller somehow, diminished by the cold and the weight of everything that had happened. My mother's coat was too thin, and my father kept stamping his feet to keep warm. They'd been waiting for over an hour, I later learned. Waiting in the snow, hoping I'd come home, hoping I'd give them a chance. I almost kept driving. Almost circled the block and went to Emma's instead, let them stand there in the cold until they gave up and went home. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the way my mother's shoulders were hunched against the wind, or the way my father kept checking his watch like he was counting down the minutes until he could stop hoping. Or maybe it was what Emma had said about poison and forgiveness. I parked the car and walked toward them slowly, my breath misting in the cold air. "Hi," I said, my voice coming out smaller than I'd intended. "Hi, sweetheart," my father said, and his voice broke on the last word. We went inside, up to my apartment where it was warm and the Christmas lights I'd strung along the bookshelf cast a soft glow. I made tea, the same chamomile Emma always ordered, And we sat in that same living room where everything had fallen apart and tried to put something back together. I've been angry, I said, staring into my cup. So angry I could barely breathe sometimes. Because you took away my choice. You decided for me that I didn't need to know Emma existed. And that wasn't fair. You're right, my mother said immediately. It wasn't fair. It wasn't right. We made a choice 32 years ago that we regret every single day. And then we made another choice to keep lying that we regret even more. Why, I asked, looking up at them. Why keep lying once I was older? Once I could have handled it? My father cleared his throat. Because we were terrified. Terrified you'd hate us. Terrified you'd leave us. Terrified we'd lose you completely. The longer we waited, the harder it got, until it's like the lie was the only thing holding us all together. But it was holding us together with poison, I said softly. It was rotting us from the inside. My mother nodded, tears streaming down her face. I know, and I'm so sorry, Claire. If I could go back and do it differently, I would. I'd find a way to keep you both, or at least I'd tell you the truth from the beginning. But I can't go back. All I can do is tell you now that I'm sorry and I love you, and I will spend the rest of my life trying to make this right. I felt something inside me loosen just slightly. It's not going to be easy, I said. I'm still hurt, I'm still angry, and Emma, you need to meet Emma. You need to apologize to her too. We will, my father said quickly. Whatever you need, whatever it takes. We sat there for a long time, drinking tea and talking about things we should have talked about years ago. About fear and love and the terrible choices people make when they're desperate. About forgiveness and the long, slow work of rebuilding trust. When they finally left, stepping out into the snow that was still falling soft and silent, I felt lighter somehow. Not healed, not yet, but lighter. We all met for the first time together in January at a small Italian restaurant with red checkered tablecloths and candles flickering in wine bottles. Emma wore a green dress that made her eyes, our eyes, glow. My parents sat across from us, nervous and formal, like they were meeting foreign dignitaries instead of the daughter they'd given away. Emma, my mother said, her voice shaking. I don't know how to say how sorry I am. There aren't words big enough, deep enough. But I need you to know that giving you to another family was the hardest thing I've ever done, and not a day has gone by that I haven't thought about you. Wondered about you, wished things had been different. Emma was quiet for a long moment, her hands folded in her lap. Then she said, I had a good life. My parents, my adoptive parents, they loved me fiercely. They gave me everything I could have wanted, but they couldn't give me Claire, and that's a loss I'll feel for the rest of my life. I know, my mother whispered. I know, and I'm so sorry. But, Emma continued, I'm also grateful. Because as much as it hurts that we lost all that time, I'm grateful I found Claire now. I'm grateful we have a chance to be sisters, even if it's starting later than it should have. She looked at me then, and something passed between us, an understanding, a solidarity. And I'm grateful that you loved her, Emma said, turning back to my parents, that you gave her a good life, because it means that at least one of us got to grow up with you, and that's something. My father started crying then, silent tears running down his weathered cheeks. My mother reached across the table and took Emma's hand, and Emma let her. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't a Hollywood ending where everyone hugged and all the pain disappeared, but it was real and honest, and it was a beginning. Spring came slowly that year. Emma moved closer, taking a nursing job at the hospital downtown. We started a tradition of Sunday brunches, just the two of us at first, and then gradually including my parents and eventually her boyfriend Marcus, who proposed again, and this time she said yes. We went through my parents' photo albums together, Emma and I, seeing the childhood I'd had, and she hadn't. At first it was painful. Every birthday party, every Christmas morning felt like evidence of what she'd lost. But slowly something shifted. Tell me about this one, she'd say, pointing to a picture of me covered in mud, grinning like a wild thing. And I'd tell her the story, about the day I decided to dig to China in the backyard, about how my father had spent an hour helping me before my mother called us in for lunch, about how we'd never quite gotten the dirt stains out of my favourite overalls. I would have helped, Emma said softly. We could have dug together. We still can, I said. We can make new memories, better ones. And we did. We took a road trip together that summer, just the two of us, driving along the coast with the windows down and terrible music playing too loud. We stayed in cheap motels and ate gas station snacks and talked about everything, our hopes, our fears, our dreams for the future. One night, sitting on a beach with the waves crashing in the darkness, Emma said, "Do you think we would have been different if we'd grown up together?" I thought about it. Maybe, probably, but I don't think we'd be better. Just different. "I used to be so angry," she admitted. "When I first found out about what happened, I was furious. At your parents, at my biological mother, at the whole unfair universe. But now..." She trailed off, watching the moonlight dance on the water. "Now?" I prompted. "Now I think maybe this is how it was supposed to happen. Not because it was right or fair, but because this, us here now, is real. And maybe that's enough." I leaned my head on her shoulder, feeling the solid warmth of her beside me. "It's more than enough," I said. "It's everything." We found our biological mother in September, almost exactly a year after that text message. Her name was Sarah, just like my father had said, and she was living in a small town in Oregon, working as a librarian. The private investigator Emma had hired tracked her down, and Emma called her first. "She wants to meet us," Emma told me, her voice tight with emotions I couldn't quite name. If we want to meet her, we debated for weeks. We just rebuilt one family. Did we have the energy to potentially add another? What if she rejected us? What if she was disappointed in who we'd become? What if meeting her reopened wounds we were just learning to heal? In the end, we decided to go, because we needed to know. Because she was part of our story, even if she'd only been there for the beginning. We flew to Oregon on a Friday afternoon, rented a car, and drove to the address the investigator had provided. The house was small and tidy, with a garden full of late summer flowers and a wind chime that sang softly in the breeze. Sarah opened the door before we even knocked. She was 52, small and slight, with grey threading through her brown hair and the same hazel eyes Emma and I shared. She looked at us and started crying immediately. "I've dreamed of this," she said, her voice breaking. "I've dreamed of this moment for 32 years. We talked for hours. She told us about the scared 20-year-old girl she'd been, pregnant and alone, with no money and no prospects. She told us about the agonizing decision to give us up, about the couple, my parents, who seemed so kind, and the other couple, Emma's parents, who had been on a waiting list for years. "I thought I was doing the right thing," she said, her hands trembling around her teacup. "Giving you both to families who could provide for you, who desperately wanted children. I thought that was love, letting you go so you could have better lives." "It was love," Emma said softly. "It was just also really complicated." Sarah looked at her, then at me. "I followed you both," she admitted. "Not in a creepy way, I hope. But I've kept track over the years. I know you're a teacher, Claire. I know you're a nurse, Emma. I've seen pictures on social media, heard news through mutual acquaintances. I've been so proud of you both, even though I had no right to be." "You have every right," I said, surprising myself. "You gave us life. That matters. We didn't leave Oregon for 3 days. We stayed in a bed and breakfast down the street from Sarah's house and spent every waking hour with her, trying to compress 32 years into 72 hours. It was exhausting and exhilarating, and sometimes painful, but it was also healing in ways I hadn't expected. On our last morning, Sarah took us to her garden, the one we'd seen from the street that first day. "I planted this when you were born," she said, gesturing to the flowers. "One flower for each of you. They come back every year, and I think of you both every time I see them bloom." Emma and I stood there, looking at the flowers our birth mother had planted for us, and I felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness exactly, but understanding and acceptance of all the messy, complicated ways people try to love each other. I'm sitting at my kitchen table now, writing this all down. It's been 2 years since Emma walked into my life. 2 years of learning and growing, and sometimes stumbling. My parents and I are still rebuilding our relationship, brick by careful brick. Emma's parents, I call them Tom and Linda now, have welcomed me with open arms. Sarah sends us cards on our birthday and calls once a month to catch up. We're a family. Not a traditional one, Not a simple one, but a family nonetheless. Emma's getting married next month. She asked me to be her maid of honor, and I cried for an hour straight when she did. We've been planning the wedding together, choosing flowers, tasting cakes, arguing lovingly about centerpieces. My mother is making the dress. Sarah is hosting the rehearsal dinner. Tom and Linda are walking Emma down the aisle together. And me? I'll be standing beside my sister, the way I should have been able to my entire life, finally in the right place. Sometimes I think about the girl I was before that text message came through, the girl who thought she knew her story, who had her life neatly organized and understood. Part of me misses that simplicity, that certainty. But mostly I'm grateful, because yes, I lost 32 years with my sister. Yes, my parents made a terrible choice that rippled through all our lives. Yes, there's been pain and anger and grief, but there's also been love. Fierce, complicated, imperfect love that bent but never broke. Emma says she doesn't believe in fate, but she believes in choice. She believes that every day we wake up and choose to keep showing up for each other is a day that matters, and I think she's right. I look at the pictures on my wall now, new ones of Emma and me together, us at the beach, our arms around each other, us at Thanksgiving, surrounded by our complicated, beautiful family, us just last week, laughing at some joke I can't even remember anymore. In every picture, I'm not alone, and that makes all the difference. If you're listening to this story, if it touched something deep inside your heart, I want you to know that you're not alone either. We all have missing pieces, secrets that shaped us, choices other people made that changed our lives forever. But we also have the power to choose what we do with those pieces, those secrets, those choices. We can let them break us, or we can let them make us stronger. We can hold on to anger, or we can reach for forgiveness. We can stay alone, or we can take the risk of letting people in. I'm not saying it's easy. It's the hardest thing I've ever done, but I'm saying it's worth it. Because on the other side of all that pain, all that fear, all that uncertainty, there's connection, there's love, there's family, and maybe that's what we're all searching for anyway. If this story touched something in your heart, I'd love to hear about it. Leave a whisper in the comments below about your own missing pieces, your own complicated families, your own journey toward forgiveness. And if you'd like to listen to more stories like this, stories about the messy, beautiful, heartbreaking way we love each other, just stay close. Subscribe. Let me keep whispering these truths to you. Because we all need reminders sometimes that we're not alone in this, that even when life splits us apart, love can stitch us back together, that it's never too late to find the people who are meant to be ours. Until next time, this is Olivia, whispering softly into the spaces between heartbeats, reminding you that your story matters too.